What you're looking at now is what many regard to be the last great iPhone. An iPhone that, unlike today's models, have everything you need right out of the box. A headphone jack and lightning port for simultaneous charging while listening to music with wired headphones, TouchID for incredibly quick and accurate unlocking, and even 4K video recording. But like any iconic piece of technology, there comes a point where it's just too old to use anymore and becomes a symbol of what once was great. And since the iPhone 6s was released in late 2015, it begs the question, can you still use this phone in 2021? Let's find out. The iPhone 6s was launched on September 25th, 2015, which was accompanied by a Plus variant that had similar specs aside from a bigger screen and battery. The normal model here has a 4.7-inch Retina HD LCD display, which is dwarfed by most of today's iPhones, an Apple A9 dual-core processor, 2GB of system memory, TouchID, a 1750 mAh battery, 12-megapixel rear-facing camera capable of shooting 4K video, a modest 5-megapixel front-facing selfie camera, and of course, a headphone jack. In regards to the design, this is one of the most iconic cell phone designs ever made. In fact, this is the design that got Apple third on the list of best-selling mobile phones of all time. Apple loved this design so much that their phones had this general design language for 4 consecutive generations, and they even brought it back with the 2020 iPhone SE. Unlike the iPhone SE, the 6s does not have wireless charging due to its metal back, so the only method of charging is through the lightning port. Those specs were great in 2015, but it's 2021 now, so how did this phone stand up to the time? Although the 6s launched with iOS 9, Apple has done a fantastic job at keeping it up to date all the way to today's iOS 14 software updates. To put that into perspective, the Samsung Galaxy S6, released in the same year, launched with Android 5.0 but only got 2 major updates, meaning the phone can only run Android 7.0, which was released in late 2016. While third-party ROMs like Lineage OS exist and highlight the benefits of not having a walled-off garden like Apple, I just don't think it's acceptable from a device that was almost the same price as a 6s. Even if over time the device becomes less snappy doing day-to-day tasks like opening apps or taking photos, people who can live with that slowdown can still benefit from having the latest security updates protecting them from the latest software vulnerabilities. Fortunately, the 6s is the oldest iPhone to be supported by iOS 14, but unfortunately, I get the feeling that later this fall, I think Apple is going to drop it from their latest software updates. So if you want to use this phone in 2021, it's important to understand that it's probably going to be depreciated soon, and I just can't recommend using a phone that doesn't get any security updates anymore. Alright, so this year at WWDC, Apple announced the next installment of iOS, which is called iOS 15 to surprise absolutely no one. What did surprise a lot of people though, including myself, was the fact that going from iOS 14 to 15, Apple would not drop support for any of their 19 devices during the transition. So basically everything I just said turned out not to be true. The iPhone 6s gets to live one more year with the newest software updates. However, the sentiment I was portraying still stands. Come WWDC 2022, what are the chances that Apple is going to support a nearly 7-year-old device? To be fair, Apple is extremely vertically integrated, and that is what has allowed them to support the 6s for 6 years now. But supporting a device for 7 years is going to be hard even for Apple. So even with the 6s getting iOS 15, I still think the end of line is coming soon in terms of software updates. Perhaps the defining feature of this phone is that glorious headphone jack, allowing you to plug in any pair of wired headphones and keep charging the phone at the same time. The successor to the 6s, the iPhone 7, started the trend of ditching the headphone jack in favor of accelerating the development and sales of wireless headphones. This gamble has paid off for Apple, as their own line of wireless earbuds have become bestsellers, and thanks to their W1 chips, compare seamlessly with multiple Apple devices. It really does just work, even with older devices like this phone. The popularity of AirPods has also kickstarted the ecosystem of cheap knockoffs, but also some good inexpensive wireless earbuds. For that reason, in 2021, I don't think the headphone jack is that big of a deal anymore. For example, if you are buying a new iPhone 12 for $699, chances are you can afford a pair of $40 wireless earbuds, but will probably buy AirPods anyway. And passing the aux in the car is being phased out in favor of a more integrated system of Apple CarPlay, which the 6S does support. But let's say you have an older car like me which does not have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. What do? Well, I don't think keeping a $7 adapter in your car at all times is the end of the world. It works, and even though you won't have buttons on your steering wheel to skip songs or activate Siri or whatever, you can use the Hey Siri feature to play certain songs, playlists, artists, change volume, etc. all hands-free. And if you have an older car that doesn't have built-in Bluetooth, then check out this video we did of how to install Bluetooth in your car on the cheap. For these reasons, as I said, I just don't think the 6S's headphone jack is that big of a deal anymore. Yes, it'll be great that one time you have to plug in a 3.5mm headphone jack into your phone, but that convenience does not outweigh the inconveniences that this phone has. Like the performance. Although the 6S outperformed its competition back in 2015, it gets absolutely creamed by today's iPhones. A test in Geekbench 5 shows the improvements Apple have made to both single-core and multi-core performance, making the newer iPhones substantially faster in all departments. This is of no surprise though, because over the last 5 to 6 years, Apple has matured the processors enough to ship a 6-core A14 Bionic processor with the latest iPhone 12 and 12 Pro. In contrast to the dual-core A9 found in the 6S, obviously the much newer hardware is going to perform better. But benchmarks are just numbers anyway. This wouldn't matter if the 6S hasn't slowed down over the years, but it has. When I was daily driving this phone, I found that somewhat frequent freezes and overall sluggish performance started to get annoying when I was trying to do simple everyday tasks. A perfect example of this is when apps would start to update in the background. It would absolutely cripple my device, and I found it to get quite warm to the touch. The keyboard would also do this thing where it would freeze and then all of a sudden type a whole bunch of characters at once. That was pretty annoying too. Also, when using my AirPods Pro, if I were to start playing music in Spotify, then open an app like Snapchat or Twitter, the audio would start to cut out until I restarted Spotify. Other older iPhone users have complained about this as well, and while it may not happen on all 6S phones, it's something that you do have to accept as a risk when you buy older devices like this. Cameras are one of the most rapidly evolving components in a smartphone, which is evident by comparing the 6S's single 12-megapixel rear-facing camera to the multi-camera system found in today's iPhones. It doesn't therefore have a macro lens or telephoto lens, but I think the camera has held up modestly over the years as camera tech has become better and better. In good light, the 6S's camera can capture photos that have a good amount of detail, sharpness, and color to please just about anyone using this phone. It is way more than enough for Snapchat, Instagram, and taking memorable photos. That's not to say though that the new iPhone cameras don't bring welcome improvements. The addition of a macro and telephoto lens on the iPhone 12 Pro means you have more versatility to capture a photo in the exact way you want it to, rather than being content with the 6S's decent FOV and digital zoom. In terms of video, the 6S has managed to stay modern with the ability to record 4K 30fps video, but like any iPhone requires lots of light to get a clean, non-noisy image. But in reality, unless you're recording something like YouTube videos, you're probably going to be recording in 1080p or 720p to save storage space. TLDR, this camera has held up well over the years and is still good for a majority of people, but lacks some newer features like nightlight and a multi-camera system. There is no hiding the fact that the battery inside the 6S is just terrible. To be fair, any lithium-ion battery will lose the ability to maintain charge over time, but in the case of the 6S, it's pretty extreme. From personal experience, since Apple damaged my original 6S during a battery replacement, I got an identical 6S in late 2018. Less than a year later, on June 21st, 2019, I had to go in for another battery replacement because the battery was so bad. This is perhaps the one downside to running the most recent software updates for over 5 years. It slows the phone down, and especially iOS 12 tanked the battery performance on these devices. By the end of 2020, running the latest iOS version, I could not get this phone to last me a whole day with a relatively light load, and I found myself having to charge it fully again in the middle of the day to survive. As I mentioned before, all batteries get old and their performance start to degrade, but in the case of the 6S, it's pretty intense. Only about 5 on-screen hours if you're lucky. However, this is a part of the phone that is somewhat fixable. Eventually, when Apple stops offering the battery replacement service for the 6S, you should be able to buy new batteries from iFixit.com. You could also carry around a portable battery bank or buy a battery case, but I would use this analogy. It's like fixing a leaky pipe with duct tape. It's only a temporary fix. For the reasons outlined in this video, the iPhone 6S is one of the greatest iPhones of all time. Now though, I think it's just too old to use as a daily driver. The combination of sluggish performance when even doing the most basic tasks and horrendous battery life is hard to recommend to people looking for an inexpensive iPhone in 2021. That means sadly, it's the end of the road for the iPhone 6S, and people looking to buy an inexpensive iPhone should look at picking up a secondhand iPhone 8 or trying to splurge a little bit and get a iPhone SE 2020. Or look at an Android alternative like the Poco M3, which is a brand new phone that costs only $129. I wouldn't blame you for not wanting to leave the Blue Bubble ecosystem though. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider giving us a like. If you enjoyed this video, then chances are you'll enjoy some of our other videos, so make sure to check out our channel if you did. And that'll be it. See you guys next week.